Typical monopolies holds tremendous amount of market power and usually act more in the interest of the firm rather than society itself. So, market failure often arises. So, this will require the government to come in to regulate the monopolies. We can do this in three ways: through prohibition, nationalization, and government regulation. Prohibition simply means that the government makes the formation of monopolies illegal through the impositioning of laws that ban anti-competitive behavior between firms. Now, drastic strategies like the use of predatory pricing and even cooperating and engaging in agreements between two or more firms are not allowed. An example of such a law would be the Sherman Act for the United States and the Competition Act in Singapore. They basically restrict on the following. Sometimes these laws are also known as antitrust laws. A few years ago, Grab and Uber came under the spotlight because of their merger. US-based Uber sold its Southeast Asian business to its rival Grab, effectively giving Grab its market share and allowing Grab to have monopolistic control in the ride-hailing market. This prompted the Singapore Competition Watchdog (CCCS) to look into such a behavior and found that the two companies were guilty of monopolistic behavior and fined them a total of $13 million over this merger deal. On a more international front, Microsoft has been accused of monopoly behavior because it was bundling its Internet Explorer web browser with its Windows operating systems, effectively preventing consumers from using other web browsers. This was eventually stopped by the US government. In Europe, Amazon is set to face antitrust charges raised by the European Union because it has been accused of unfairly using data collected from third-party merchants to boost its own product offerings, effectively boxing out smaller rivals in the online shopping platform. The second way in which the government can regulate is that of nationalization. Simply said, the government takes over the company and run the monopoly in the interest of the public. Now, this is not usually often done and only done in the case of natural monopoly where it's very difficult to break the monopoly up since the MES of such a firm occurs at a very large output. It makes more sense to run it as one single firm to supply the entire market. There are also issues with nationalization because the government may not be as productively or dynamically efficient since it does not have the expertise, knowledge of private firms, nor is it motivated by profits. An example to share here would be the nationalization of railways in the 40s in the UK. The railway systems had to be nationalized in order to help rebuild the network infrastructure after the destructive effects of the Second World War. The third and last method is through government regulation of the prices set by the monopolies. The government will force the monopolies to adopt certain pricing policies in the form of MC pricing or AC pricing or two-part tariff. Again, such a regulation tends to be imposed on natural monopolies, which is very, very difficult to break up. You can pause the video now to copy the summary map on my right-hand side. Now we can actually show how MC pricing works by drawing a diagram. Let's start with including the AR and MR curve, followed by the LRAC and LRMC curve that looks like this because we are illustrating the case of a natural monopoly. Now, where MR intersect MC, that is the point where the monopoly maximizes profits. The monopolies will produce QM and sell QM at price PM. Now, it is quite obvious that the monopolies is earning supernormal profits as illustrated by the yellow rectangle. Now, we don't want this to happen because the monopolies is earning supernormal profits at the expense of the consumers. PM is clearly greater than marginal cost. There is allocative inefficiency. So what can the government do? The government can force the monopoly to charge at price equals to MC instead. This is the point where the demand curve of the monopolies intersects the LRMC curve here. Now it's quite obvious that the monopolies is now compelled to produce much more at QR and sell it at a much lower price at PR. But because P is equals to MC at this point, allocative efficiency is achieved. But from the firm's point of view, it will start to suffer and incur subnormal profits instead. And this is shaded by the pink rectangle here. So what should the government do? Well, the government can try to subsidize and help the firm defray the cost of these subnormal profits. Another alternative is to come to a compromise and allow the firm to adopt two-part tariff pricing policy. Okay, and we'll learn more about this next. Marginal cost pricing often results in the monopolies sustaining subnormal profits. This is actually bad for the government because the government will need to come in to subsidize the companies and help them with the subnormal profits. So the government may allow for a system of two-part tariff. So how does it work? The consumers will be charged a fixed sum for simply having access to the service. This amount of money will help the company to cover its fixed costs and remain in business. Subsequently, the consumers, the users, will be charged additional sums of money for use of the service. So for every additional unit they consume, they will have to pay equivalent to the marginal cost of producing that additional unit. An example would be, say, like admission to amusement parks. You often have to pay a single admission fee first, right? And once you gain admission to the park, you sometimes have to pay additional sums of money for taking the more premium rides, right? So you can pause here now to actually highlight the words given in red in your lecture notes in page 20. Another way is for the government to compel the monopolies to implement AC pricing instead. This is the point where the monopolies will produce where demand curve cuts the AC. Let's pull out the revenue and cost curves again. This is the point here, where the new equilibrium is where the monopolies will produce at QS and sell at PS. Now, as you can clearly see, PS can cover the average cost of production, so there is no need for the government to come in to subsidize the company since the firm is making normal profits. Unfortunately, at this price PS, it is far greater than MC. Allocative efficiency is still not achieved. There is in fact under allocation of resources to the production of this good. Society actually prefers more to be produced at QR. So I guess this is a situation where the government has to settle with if it is not able to keep on subsidizing the monopolist.